and welcome to yet another edition of Burn Sports. I'm your host, Earl Basden, and joining me is an Olympian and two-time Commonwealth Games participant for Bermuda, Katura Horton Perinchief. Katura, first of all, welcome. You've had a
Thank you.
career in the sport of diving. You also done plenty of other sports as well. And we do want to get to what you're giving back to our youngsters today as far as the star diving. But we want to go back a little bit into when you got started. Your first Commonwealth Games was in England in 2002. Can you remember back about anything about that competition itself?
Yeah, that was my very first big meet for Bermuda, and period, but also for Bermuda. So I was a bit of a newcomer to the stage. The Minister of Sport was my Uncle Randy. So he was there. My entire family went to watch me dive in Manchester. And truthfully, I was pretty nervous for the entire preliminaries, just to get my feet wet. And I was, pun intended, I was also diver number one. So it was a lot of nerves, but we got through it.
How does one like you overcome that and having to be the first one? You get a chance to warm up and all that, but then you realize I'm first.
I'm always first. I was first at the Olympics too. I don't know what it is. I think, they say that they're automatically sorted, randomly sorted, but I'm always randomly selected for security checks also at the airport. So maybe it's something to do with my luck. I think, you know what, it was a bit of a blessing in disguise because I got to open the meet, set the tone, and I had my strongest dive. So the way that I would set up my list as a diver would be to start with something I knew I couldn't miss. So whether there were nerves playing on me or not, I knew I couldn't miss that dive. So at the end of the day, for me, it was just about, once you get to that stage, everybody's physically in the same space, capable of the same things or similar things. The mental toughness is what gets you through. And that's something that any athlete has to train with and build the skill with, just as much as any physical strength. So really, I had to rely on my meditation and calming my nerves and things like that, going into that first dive.
A year later, you have two major meets because you have the World Championships in Spain and the Pan Am Games in Dominican Republic. But you've got that year under your belt. You've got that one time knowing what it's like to be in the major games. But you go to the World Championships, and obviously that in itself, you've now gotten everybody around the world in that because it's World Games and it's just like it's similar to the Olympics. It's not just a Commonwealth thing. So how do you get set up for something like that?
I think Worlds was all my Worlds have been my toughest meets. These are people you only see on TV who will beat you handily. China is a diving machine. And there's always some 12-year-old in the wings waiting to beat you. So I think for me, again, it was just managing my nerves. I don't think that, as I said, physically, I was in the best shape of my life. I was ready for that meet. It was a tough one, though, because it was long. As you said, it's World Championships, so a lot of countries. And it's a 5-hour event sometimes, and you're waiting. And with respect to Barcelona, it's an outdoor facility, something that I was not used to. So learning different spots. So as you're spinning as a diver, the reason, as Bermudians say, you don't sting up as much is you look for visual cues as you're spinning. Very different in an outdoor facility where the ceiling is not a ceiling, it's the sky, and it's the same color as the water. So just getting used to that in practices was good. But a lot of the people were familiar to me. I saw people from the Pan Am region, people from the Commonwealth region. So adding the other countries was challenging, But mentally, I still had friends there. I had people I was used to. So some people I knew I could beat. So that was good.
I was going to ask you that because when you go to Worlds, are you looking to make sure you're beating the people in your region? So because you've got the Pan Am Games right after that, so trying to make sure that you have that psychological edge over these people when you get to that next meet?
Yeah, I think maybe a little bit, but really I wanted to beat everybody. So I don't think there was really just I want to beat everybody in the Pan Am region. There are people who are strong and they'll always be strong no matter what. Um, but I think that you're probably right in that if I was successful at beating some people, um, in your head you're like, well, now I can do it, I'm capable of doing that. So you see what's possible with respect to your craft, and then the next meet with the Pan Am Games coming up, you're like, okay, right, I can beat a Canadian, I can beat one of them, or I can beat two Americans, which is helpful.
Yeah. Knowing that you had a bit of a gymnastics background, does that help you with diving as well? Because like you say, you're looking for those spots, and doing gymnastics, you're also looking for spots when you're spinning and doing all sorts of things while you're airborne.
Yeah, look at you. You're a gymnast in your past life. I think that gymnastics with respect to maneuvers and having body awareness is probably one of those sports that every kid should do. It's so yeah, it helped me. But the difference in gymnastics is you're landing on your feet. In diving, you're landing on your head. So there is diving specific training on trampoline and on dry land, which is very different from gymnastics. But yeah, it's a gymnastics base. Flipping, spinning, it's a gymnastics base.
Both sports are predominantly done by people who are between the ages of, like you said, 12, and then what's some of the cap age for divers? Because a lot of people don't realize diving takes a lot of strength in many parts of the body that gets injured a lot, isn't it?
Yeah. So you normally peak around 22, 23. That's the later edge of the age categories. After that, you don't come back as easily. You don't rehab as easily. That being said, we had the oldest medalist at the time when I was diving was Marilyn Clark, and she was 32. That was amazing. And now we're looking for a comeback from Olympic gold medalist Laura Wilkinson, now Laura Husselman, who is actually 39, 40. So, but she's come back and she's at the top of her game. But it's a kid's sport. It's a young kid's sport because, as you said, I mean, it's like hitting a brick wall. So you get these injuries over time that you may or may not be able to rehab. When you're 12, you don't get injured. You just get crumpled and then you pop back to where you were before. Not so when you're 30.
Talk us a bit about because we all grew up around water, so we love jumping off the rocks, and we consider that diving. Like when we're swimming, we consider it swimming. But when you see it's technique, it's art, it's all sorts of things, because you can really hurt yourself if you're off balance, if if your body's not in the right contacts and all that.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to master and get to the level in which you got to, and how much training took place in between there?
I think mastery is a difficult term. I would never take away from our Admiralty House special divers here. I think they're great, and I love going over there and showing them up. And I actually saw some of my campers on Bermeems the other day showing these people up, so I loved it. But I trained 6 days a week. When I was 5, I started, once a week. I think I was in the water an hour. By the time I was 7, I was diving 3 times a week for 2 hours at a time. I became Canadian national champion at age 15. At that point, I was in the water 6 times a week, 6 hours a day. So that would be morning. I'd get there at 5 a.m. I'd be there until 8, go to school. School started at 8:30. I'd come back to the pool at 4, and we'd go until 7, 8 o'clock at night. And that was every day until I went to college. So I went to the University of Texas. And as you can appreciate, they have a really well structured program. They put our classes around training. So I was in the weight room 3 times a week, in the pool 6 times a week. And then on top of that, we had study hall class and some sports psych. And then, yeah, rehab and all of that stuff. So it was really my life for 20 years, for 2 decades. So, when people say, oh, you trained 4 years for the Olympics, you don't. It's you train decades for the
A
Olympics, and
lifetime,
maybe
yeah.
you get there,
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if mastery, they in Outliers they talk about 10,000 hours of doing the same thing over and over, and I think that's probably about it.
Yeah. Yeah. When you look at how did you choose diving over swimming?
Swimming is terrible. What a boring sport, this back and forth. No, I don't think I ever actually did swimming. As a kid, I swam for my high school because I was good. But as a kid, I was a bit of a thrill seeker. So, when I was here, I would dive. My first dive off of a boat I was 2. I was barely swimming. But my mom let me plunge overboard off my uncle's boat. By 4, I was diving off of Somerset Bridge, and that's head first off of Somerset Bridge. Yeah, so I think I was always a bit of a thrill seeker and adrenaline junkie. And what was great about my mom at that time was that, she put me in softball for obvious reasons. She wanted me to follow in those Big Blue Machine footsteps. But, I couldn't not hit, run, do anything good at all with respect to softball catch. So anything with my body, gymnastics, swimming, I was okay, track, diving. So we ended up picking that sport, and I loved it. I was an adrenaline junkie, even at 5.
Yeah. What meet were you at where you qualified for the Olympics?
I did. So the World Cup, this was a strange qualification situation. It was actually the first Olympic Games that they did not take everybody who met the minimum qualifying score. So the IOC limited the number of divers who could go. So there were 35 total divers allowed to go to the Olympics in each event. Going into the World Cup, I was ranked 40 something. I was about 23rd in the world, but overall, but going into that last event, I was ranked 40 something, and I had to be 35th. So it was the last ditch effort. So we not only had to get that qualifying score, but also the meet was, I think it was about 5.5 hours long, with about 180 girls. So I had to place top 35 in the event. And I came 34th. So that was when I earned my spot. And I was not diving number 1 at the time, but I was diving pretty early up in the list.
Rotation.
So I'm watching my name drop down as each girl goes, and I'm like, come on, do not drop past 35. So I'm watching, and I had dove well, but everybody was diving well. Everybody knew it was a last ditch effort. They pulled out their best dives. They were clean. And I knew I had done well, but I did not know if it had been enough until I think we had 2 divers left, and I was already ahead of them. So I said, okay, there's no way they can catch me. And I was able to relax a little bit.
what else were you doing? Because obviously it's butterfly, because it's out of your hands. You've done what you had to do, and you're looking at a board. Are you one of those nervous people that pace up and down, or do you just sit there?
No. I can't. No. I had to make sure that the board was coming up with my name and that it was dropping appropriately. So I watched, the entire competition. I am one of those people who takes myself out of the competition environment. So basically, I would go to a back room. I never watched the event. So I didn't know how other people were doing. I never looked at the scoreboard until my last dive was done. So when my last dive was done, I positioned myself so that I could see my name on the board as it, either fell or rose. So yeah, that's what I was doing. I was watching. And at the same time, I was watching my mother, who was in the stands, who was also watching, and she was writing down scores as they came. She's a mathematician. So before the scores came up, she would look at me and be like, or so it was good. It was a nerve-wracking time, but earning that Olympic spot was one of the highlights of my career.
The fact that you had to earn it, and then you're back in Greece because that's where the World Cup was. Did they use the same facility?
Same facility. And actually, that's the beauty of diving and qualification for diving. They always do the last ditch effort in the facility where they're going to host the Olympic Games. So it's a bit bittersweet if you're someone who doesn't make it. Right. Because you're there in the Olympic Stadium before the Olympics, but you're not able to come back. So, my goal at that time was to see that pool again, with Bermuda across my chest after having walked into that Olympic opening ceremony stadium. And I was blessed to have that opportunity.
Quite a few Bermudians have had that opportunity to walk into a stadium for the opening ceremony. And a lot of Bermudians have watched it, but to actually walk through it, can you describe what those emotions and feelings are like?
I mean, it's almost indescribable. It's to be very fair, I think it's similar for most of the major events. When you walk in, not just the Olympics, you walk into that stadium and hear that applause. And I'll tell you, walking into my very first Commonwealth Games stadium in Manchester it rivaled the Olympic Games, because we were led out by legendary Man City striker Sean Goda. So we actually got a reception that rivaled England's reception when we went in. In the Olympic Stadium, I'm going to tell you, we walked in and we are corralled. So you hear your country name, but you hear very little else, because all you hear is the crowd, just the screaming and everything. And you don't hear individual screams, you just hear a mass. And this was before the age of cell phones. So you didn't see it. We weren't taking video. We were just taking it in and waving. And, it was amazing. And when they corralled us into the center, I got stuck up against Allen Iverson. And I was like, oh, well, hello, you're like my favorite basketball player. So parts of that were the parts that I remember. We couldn't see the show like the people see, because we were part of the show. I think they've made a few changes with that to make it more of an athlete-centered experience. But you have to remember, this was 2004. They didn't care about that. So they just made us part of the show. And yeah, and then we were ready to leave, because really, even though that was an amazing experience, that's not what any of us were there for.
Right. I know a lot of people don't realize, but to do an opening ceremony at a major event is time consuming for the athletes themselves, because they have to corral you in an area that you're there for almost 3 hours before you even come out. And then you're out there, and most athletes, if they're competing either the next day or the day after, really doesn't want to stay, because you need to get your rest, and you need to get that next lot of training in. It's just, it's so much that goes into it, because people only get to see Bermuda, and here you come out and they see the smiles, the waves, and all that.
Yeah. And I think to
taking
be fair,
one through,
like some of our people, the triathletes will never go because they're the next day after
yes,
the opening ceremony. So we'll never see Flora Duffy in an opening
opening
ceremony.
ceremony.
We'll
Yeah,
never see, our triathletes, which is tough. But, just as you said, you're there and you've got a water bottle and an apple maybe. And these are things that are provided to you. And yeah, you walk out, and now to be very fair, they've tried to enhance this experience. When I was there, we stood for the entire 3 hours that we were on the field, which was insanity. Now at least they have athlete seating. They've talked about things like early departure so that if you have to leave, there are ways to do that without disrupting the show. And there are buses back. But at the time, it was a 6-7 hour commitment, and you get back to the village. You may or may not have food available after you've skipped dinner, which I mean, I don't know if this gets across properly, but if you're somebody who is on the Olympic stage, you have every part of your nutrition planned, every part of your rest schedule and rest regime planned. And so to take that time out, it's mentally taxing, it's physically taxing. Plus, on top of that, you're in your regalia. So I mean, you're not out there in some sweats and sneakers. You're in Bermuda shorts and a blazer and dress shoes and standing up for hours. So, it's a bit of a risk, but it may also be your only opportunity to do that. So a lot of athletes do choose it.
yeah. Let's fast forward because you've come back and you started a diving camp at the National Sports Center. It's been going on for a few years now. But have you seen the return participants' improvement over the years?
They're incredible. It's funny because I always think of the fact that if I had a year-round program, these kids would be spectacular. Right now, they are like the caliber of any summer league diver in the United States. So if I took them abroad to a meet, especially those who have been back 2, 3, 4 years, they'd probably win it. They're quite talented and they're well trained. But what it takes to get to the next level is a year-round diving program. But yeah, they get good. And, the funny thing to me is that, when I started it, I was just like, I hope people come, because I mean, they've never had this before. We've never done a camp at this facility and nobody's ever seen it. But, here we are. And this is our 7th year. We've seen almost 500 kids come through the program, and we've got a lot of returners, and they're good. They get really good.
What is the difference level of training for platform as opposed to a board, the diving board?
I don't think there's much difference. Springboard probably takes a little more technique because you have to wait for the rhythm of the board and catch the rhythm of the board. It's easier to hit a diving board than a platform because it moves and it'll come up and hit you if you're too close. A lot of people like platform because it doesn't move. It takes a lot less. You just chuck yourself off like you do at Admiralty House, and you chuck yourself off. There's no other external factors. So I would say that springboard probably takes a lot more rhythmic training. Some of the things that we do with that is, I mean, now that we have iPods, we can put our earbuds in and jump to the rhythm of a song. Before that, they would pipe songs out through, and you would have to jump to the rhythm of the board. So things like that. I don't know that that it takes more. It's just little different training.
What was better for you, the platform or the springboard?
So I was actually a better platform diver, but I grew. So being that tall, and I mean tall at the time, I was 5'6". I'm now 5'8". I grew after diving, but I was 5'6", which was probably around I was tall for a male diver even. Girls they're small. Some of them are under 5 feet. They're 5'1", 5'2". So, and I was heavier. I was 130 pounds, where these girls were sometimes 90 something pounds. So my strength was in moving that springboard and getting height. And, I kind of had to force the judges to look at that stuff instead of all the spinning and all of the acrobatics, because I was long and beautiful to watch type of thing. So, I was prettier on the springboard, and platform became more challenging as I grew. But I was a very strong platform diver as a young person.
You're also on the Bermuda Olympic Association Executive Board, giving back in that regard as well. What are some of the challenges that you've now seen as an administrator that you probably didn't recognize or realize as an athlete?
Everything is different. I had no idea that this much went into it. From things like team selection, and making sure people are qualified, but also, finding money to help people, help athletes train or help athletes get to meets. I think of the fact that, the Olympic Association has grown leaps and bounds from when I was there, as an athlete, from when I was an athlete. In that, they're a well-oiled machine, I would say, at this point. There are ways to get funding and to get it to athletes. I think of the fact that I was still a BOA B elite athlete, and I had made Olympic history. So there wasn't really a mechanism to move people forward and to get them more prepared for the next level. I think we're doing better now, but yeah, all of this stuff that goes into, from uniform selection to, the anthem, what anthem we play, to, just making sure everybody is where they're supposed to be when they're supposed to be there. And now things like focusing on niche things like sport for all and youth development, or women in sport. These are things that you don't think about as an athlete. You go out there, you dive, you run, you swim, and that's it. So it's a whole machine working with us and for us, and I don't think you can really get a full appreciation of that without being around that table.
You mentioned something that kind of triggered my mind. You've also been a chef at major games as well. That in itself is just as challenging, isn't it?
Maybe more so. My first, I was blessed to have my first major games that I was chefing be the Nanjing Youth Olympic Games. So there was a lot of hand-holding for new chefs. These are the forms you have to fill out. This is where your athletes have to be. And I also had the honor of serving as assistant chef under Mrs. Donna Rayner for the CAC Games. She was spectacular and led me sort of through the ranks that way. And the cool thing about CAC Games is that we actually had a split village venue type of situation. So some were in Veracruz, some were in Jalapa. So I was in charge of the group in Jalapa without having to take on all of the responsibility of a team. By the time we got to Commonwealth Games, though, yes, I had my feet wet, but at the time, we were poised to have Bermuda's only female medal, and Bermuda's second ever Commonwealth Games medal, and that was on the line. And so just making sure that our athletes were getting what they needed when they needed. It was challenging. We lost a bike. We had poor Erica Hawley and Tyler Smith were in their little camp, and we had heck getting them back there. But just all of these logistics, it's a lot. It's a lot, and it's stressful. It's a stressful job, and you're at these chef meetings at 7 a.m. every morning, and it's more than I think any of us as athletes even appreciate.
It is a lot of stuff done behind the scenes to ensure that the athlete only has to worry about competing, them and their coach. But it's a job where not a lot of people appreciate. They just see the athlete, but not knowing what had to be done in order for that athlete to compete. I think is undertaken or under stressed how much stress it is on someone like yourself who takes on the responsibility, because you're almost like a mother, a father, an uncle, a babysitter, anything.
But even
that
more than that, a media coordinator and
yes.
and like a transport agent, a travel agent. I'm just like, what in the world? But I think of the fact, the late Philip Gishard was the chef for most of my meets, and I had the honor of competing under his tutelage. But the funny thing is, I gave him a hard time. I was like, Mr. Gish, these shorts don't fit. I'm not doing that. I don't want to do this. And as athletes, you got to be selfish in some sort of some sort of perverse way. You do have to be a little selfish, because you can't worry about all these other things, and the expectation that people line up all of the external factors so that you don't have to deal with that. It's there, and we do expect that. I put him through the ringer, and I'm sorry for that. But
now somebody else is putting you through the ringer.
My performances, and he had to deal with a team full of people like that. And it wasn't until I got to serve in that capacity that you really appreciate what people do. And I mean, I was in Australia for a month for these 2-week games, making sure that everybody, even coordinating physio and coordinating, the medical team, and it's a lot. But yeah, I mean, I've grown a new appreciation for Mr. Gish and people who do what he does. So yeah.
Out of all the major events that you have competed at, what will be a lasting memory for you that you will always refer back to when giving advice?
I don't know if any one meet was like that. The Olympic Games for me was, I dove okay. I was not spectacular. I did not manage my nerves very well. And I think it was just the majesty of the moment. I had met Venus Williams and traded pins with her. As I said, I stood next to Allen Iverson. I met Tim Duncan. All of these people, Asafa Powell was at that point a friend of mine, but all of his teammates were there who I had only ever seen on TV. So, my advice to any athlete, young or older, who's in a high stress environment like that, is just to remove from yourself the sense of an imposter syndrome. I think I went through that, do I really deserve to be here competing alongside world record breakers and people who I've only seen on TV? And, to have the audacity from a country of 62,000 people to be on that global stage, did I belong there? Even though my entire career had demonstrated that indeed I did belong there, I think there was a mental piece that said, I'm from a small island, nobody expects me to be here, and I don't know if I really expected myself to be there. And I was wrong. I was 21, I was a kid, and if at the time I think I had some mentorship from someone, and luckily we're doing better with that, but some mentorship from someone like a Brian Wellman, who had been through 4 Olympic Games, to tell me, my first one was tough too. I didn't think I belonged there either. So I mean, maybe things like that would have helped. So my advice would be to, remove any notion of doubt that you don't belong on a world stage. If you have qualified an opportunity to be there, then you go there and you do the best that you can do, and Bermuda is behind you.
Just as we finish, we know that the annual Cup Match Classic, your beloved cup holders will hold the cup for one more year. They will be dethroned in St. George's next year. But the fact that
funny.
The fact that Cup Match is going to be a miss this year for you, how do you feel about that?
That is tough. You know, I love cup match. It's one of my favorite times of year. You know, we have I have several cup match captains in my family line. Somerset, obviously, and you know, it's something that it's an event that brings us all together as Bermudians. It gives us a huge sense of pride around the emancipation of our people, and it's going to be a gigantic miss. Um, I've missed two cup matches in my life, and they were because I was competing or chefing. And I didn't take well to that, and luckily by the second one they were live streaming, so I was able to watch the game. But yeah, no, it's going to be a miss. It's a miss for Bermuda, and I can't wait to get the cup back next year. And for me, you know, I think this is a wash, so I don't feel like Somerset's retaining the cup. We're not even getting to play for it. And also, I'm not a fan of draws. I want my team to beat your team. I want my team to win that cup outright. And I'm looking forward for us doing that next year.
Well, good luck to Somerset next year in St.
Luck
George.
for the ill prepared. The champions will not need luck. So good luck to your team.
Oh, okay. We will remember this conversation because a lot of people are watching, and
Okay.
come next year, phone calls will be made, and I want my congratulations.
Okay, you'll get them. I don't think so.
Well, Katura, thank you very much for this time here on Bernie Sports. We've enjoyed talking to you, reminiscing about your diving career, and the fact that you're giving back with this star diving. Actually gets underway next week, is it?
Yeah, Monday. It's our first day.
Okay.
And it
Well,
was
good
cool.
luck.
We won the Best of Bermuda award for Best Kids Camp. So, you know, there's been extra sort of excitement around it. So I'm blessed. I'm excited to welcome some new kids.
Well, there you go. Well, good luck with that this year, with so many other things happening around us shutting down, but you're able to get that camp up and going, and wish you well with the kids as well. So, folks, thank you for joining. Do enjoy the rest of your day.